Welcome to the Erasmus Foundation podcast. My name is Paul Nugent. Are you looking for answers to life and its meaning? Then this may well be the very podcast you need to listen to. In a series of podcasts, we are going to look at the difficult questions of life and apply spiritual knowledge to find out the answers. Hello. Today we are going to answer a question, a very simple question, and that is why I believe in reincarnation. We're going to tell you why we believe that reincarnation is the right choice for a belief system. With us is Mike, Corinne, and Pat. And so we'll start with you, Mike. Why do you believe in reincarnation?
Well, hello, Paul. I think for myself, Paul, the question of why I believe in reincarnation would start for me at a very young age. I was around about, I suppose, 7 or 8 years old, and my mother told me a story of when she herself was a young girl. She was very ill. She was rushed into hospital and she had to have emergency surgery. And back in them days, there wasn't the technical advances that there have been in modern times. And she was unconscious, and the doctors at the time were fearful for the worst. So they called her parents at the time and a family to come round to the hospital, to the bedside, fearing that she was to return home. Mum explained all this to me. As I say, I was about 7 or 8, and she told me this story about how she had what is often referred to as an out-of-body experience. She was drawn towards a light along a tunnel, and she said it was a lovely feeling. She wasn't fearful at all. It was a nice experience. But she was told at some point on that journey, she was told it was not her time. She was told, Jennifer, you must go back. It is not your time. And fortunately, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be here today. But she pulled through. And after a spell of time in hospital, when she came home, she spoke to her parents and her grandparents about this experience, and caused a lot of upset in the family because they couldn't understand, they couldn't explain what she had seen. She explained everyone that she'd seen in the room, what they was wearing, what was being said, and they said, no, you couldn't have because you was unconscious. And I suppose a little fearful at the time, they told her never to speak of it again. When she told this to me, obviously being a young child myself, coming from my mother, I accepted this. I believed this. I didn't fully understand it, but I believed it. And having been told about her family not telling her to talk about it, I guess in my mind as a child, I kind of kept that story to myself, really. I didn't share it with anyone else, but it was always there in the back of my mind. And I suppose I just had a belief that there was something else out there. Now, if I fast forward many years, I was in my early 20s, and I had a gentleman working for me who it turned out to be, he was a spiritual healer, very much like the spiritual healing that is given at the Erasmus Foundation. At that time in my life, I'd never heard of spiritual healing before, so I was intrigued. And after many conversations with him, a little further down the line, I was actually introduced to his wife. And his wife ran her own business. She was a reflexologist, and she worked with spirit. She had the gift of clairvoyance. And she said she would often work with spirit, would direct her to a certain part of the body that she could work on while giving reflexology. And she said to me at the time, she said, you find this interesting, which I did. She suggested to me that I look a bit further. And I did. And to cut a long story short, I went on from there. I sat in what was called some development circles. This is many years ago, about 25 years ago, maybe. I went to meditation classes. I was looking for answers, because I believed that there was more to life, after this life that we're all living at the moment. And it was through these various spiritual workshops I was going that I found myself had the gift of having clairvoyance. So I could pick up, I could sense spirit, I could hear, and at times I could see spirit. So for me, that and over many years, and then I met yourself, Paul, and you invited me along to the Erasmus Foundation, where a lot of these skills, this gift has gradually developed more. I would say the ability to sense spirit, it's hard sometimes to explain, but the easiest way I can say is if, for example, you are maybe sitting at a table or a desk, and someone comes into the room behind you, you're not aware of that, and they're standing right over you, and you just get that, you're picking up their physical vibration, you sense that they're there. For me, that is how I feel spirit, that is how I sense them, that just a vibration. So without any hesitation of doubt, I have full acceptance of spirit. Now, to take that further, if you look at things with logic and reason, there has to be more to life than just this one chance. I actually have a relative of mine who I speak quite openly about my beliefs and what I've experienced and heard and learnt from the Erasmus Foundation over the years. And they don't believe in spirit, and they don't believe in reincarnation. So I asked them, I said, well, what do you think happens when your life that you're currently living comes to an end? What do you think happens? And they said, well, that's it. They said it just ends, everything goes black, it's dark, it's over, there is nothing else. I personally would find that quite a fearsome belief to have. I would imagine that when someone is nearing the end of their life, if they know they are, maybe through illness or old age, that having that belief would be quite fearsome. I believe in reincarnation, as I said before, logically, and giving it logic and reason, that life, that the whole world, everything around us is a cycle. You look at nature. We take a tree or a plant, for example, and it will grow, it will bloom or blossom during the spring and the summer. It may well create a seed. Come the autumn, that seed would drop and it would touch the ground. And if it's the conditions are right, that seed will then carry on a cycle, and it will come back. Something will be produced and grow from that the following year. Now, I know, so we're talking with reincarnation, we're talking about ourselves as a spirit. So as we believe, or as I believe, that each one of us has an individual spirit, that is our true self. And I believe that we are here, this life I'm currently living, and in a very simple way of looking at this, I would say it's almost like going to school. So we go to school to learn, we progress, and then when we leave school, we get a job, and hopefully, we prosper well. I would say this life is a bit like a school. We come here, we're in this my current life on earth, as we all are individually, and we experience many things within that life, as has been said before. I'm sure it's been covered in many of our other podcasts that we are here. We could be rich, we could be poor, we could be of any religion, any belief system, we could be any colour, we could be male or female. All of that will be part of our tapestry, which is our lesson, if you like, within that life. Now, there is so much to learn within one's life, and we could never possibly learn everything there is to know. I consider myself quite hungry for learning. I'm interested in finding out, whether it be about different beliefs, different religions in different countries, different people. I make things with my hands, so do a lot of carpentry work. I like to learn different skills and different abilities. Now, I couldn't possibly do all what's out there. I couldn't learn what's all out there within this one life. And also, throughout that life, whatever is put in our way, whether it be an obstacle or a junction we reach, we are learning all the time from each and every one of them experiences. And with that, we will grow with spiritual wisdom. And so I believe that we would come back, we would learn so much within this lifetime that would take us to a certain point. And then when our humanoid body has come to the end of its life, we will then return home. And after a period of time, if it's decided or agreed that it is right for us to take another life, we would. For me, that would just make logical sense. It's a very hard question to answer if someone is looking for maybe scientific proof of reincarnation. But all I can say is, if I speak in honesty and truth, that is how I would feel about it, without a doubt in my mind at all.
Thank you, Mike. So, Corinne, what would you like to say on the matter of why we believe in reincarnation?
Personally, Paul, when I was a teenager, although I had been brought up in a Catholic church, I was quite open-minded to other religions, to other beliefs. And when I heard of reincarnation in Buddhism or Eastern religions, it is something I thought I was feeling quite attuned with. I thought, well, yes, why not? Perhaps we haven't got just one life. And, well, I was born in 1958, and I was listening to the Beatles and so on. And they went to India. They have been singing some songs about Krishna and so on. It was a little bit fashionable. And, when we are teenagers, we like to be in this sort of move. But really, it was making sense to me. But it was very vague. And to be true with you, some were speaking of coming back into the form of a bird or of an animal that they like. And this was rather strange to me. And really, later on, at the Erasmus Foundation, of course, I have been learning with our teachers that we would never come back under the form of an animal, because we are living in a growing way, and a human will come back as a human and have a different life. Also, our teachers have explained it so well that it was then not only a vague feeling I had, it became really not only a belief, but a strong conviction, because it is only in reincarnation that we can see God, whom we call the Great Mind, as a good God. Because when we look on the earth and we see all the differences between the people, some living in misery and despair, some having great fortune, many great opportunities, really, why all these differences? Would it be a question of chance? Well, it would be very sad for those who have difficult lives compared to others who have easy lives. But in the eyes of reincarnation, we can understand that this earth, being the university of life, we are all together living, but we have different levels of evolution, and a younger spirit will have a more easy life, and an older spirit will have a more difficult life, because the more we incarnate, the more we grow, and the more we are able to go through new, more difficult tests, perhaps, to grow even further. We have already explained that life is a growing thing, evolution. And the great mind offers us this opportunity to have different lives, so that we can also be different persons. We can be male in a life, we can be female in another life, we can be a Chinese person in another life. So, all very great opportunities to learn many, many things. Now, the growing process from a young spirit to become mature spirit is a very, very long process. It counts in tens and tens and tens of thousands of years, in a way. And we can compare this evolution as an acorn that is becoming an oak tree. And from an acorn to a very beautiful oak tree, there's really a great evolution. And it is the same for us. And the great mind offers us this great opportunity to have several lives. Also, some might be ugly, some might be beautiful. But when we look at reincarnation, we will be tolerant with others, because who knows, we might have been living in other cultures and other colors of skin. So, in the light of reincarnation, we can understand all this learning process, because Spirit has explained to us that to grow, we need to have seen all things, to have been all things. And so it really needs several lives, Paul.
Okay, Corinne, thank you. Now, Pat, we've heard quite a lot already, haven't we? Now, many people believe that we have a life and we die and we go to heaven or to hell or all that sort of thing. And of course, some people live to a couple of days old. Some people live to over 100. So there isn't a very equal playing field, is there, Pat?
No, Paul. And the very question you ask reminds me of a question I asked my father when I was younger. And this isn't to put anything upon my dad, because he is, in his own way, he's a very spiritual man. He was brought up, as I was, in the Catholic Church, and that is his conduit to his God. I asked him that very question in one of my probing thoughts I had into life, and I said to him, what about when a young person dies, and they haven't had the chance to make a right or wrong decision in a sense, because there's a lot of judgment within the Catholic Church. And that was my question to him. And he said, well, God will sort all that out. God understands all that. He didn't have any more to offer than that. And as I said, this isn't a criticism of him, because that's what he had been taught. And he held his belief dearly to him. And so he should. That was his life. But it didn't satisfy me, in as much as it didn't make sense It didn't seem rational. I hadn't really given reincarnation much thought at all, if I'm honest with you, until I met Padina and came across the foundation. And in doing so, I was very much drawn to Padina and the wisdom that herself and Erasmus and other spirits that were teaching us. So I was open to think about anything that was offered to us by them. So when they spoke about reincarnation, purely and simply that we live many lives as humans to learn all the lessons that life has to offer. So I quite quickly after that, in thinking about it, realized what logic and sense there was to it, because the question that I had asked my father, that's where I found the key to that question. And people might ask, why would a young person take a life that maybe lasts only a month? And of course, we understand that spirits take lives, and we all do in a sense, not only for ourselves, but our lives and our tapestries that we take intertwine with others, and we affect others as we live our life. And that would be the purpose of a life that on the surface may seem quite brief and inconsequential, but it isn't, because there's an awful lot of learning to be had through the parents and family and people that were close to that situation. So there's always meaning in everything. And quite often, a life is taken by an older spirit that is meant in its entirety or the majority for other people. That would probably be taken by an older spirit. So when I thought about reincarnation, I thought, as Michael and Corinne have talked about being all things and seeing all things and doing all things. One thing it did do was it made my judgments of other people, as I said, maybe I grew up in a judgmental environment, and we are so often very quick to look at other people and judge them. And when I thought about reincarnation and that I may well have been in that very situation in another life, because that person is going through something, however they're acting, whatever they're saying or doing, they're going through that and it may be hurting other people, it may be hurting themselves, but they are going through it for a purpose. And that's certainly one thing it did. It helped me think about when I found myself looking judgmentally at other people, because I was probably there, or if not, it could be me in the future. And also, when I used to look at other people, which in some senses is a little bit of a pointless exercise, but I certainly indulge in it from time to time, thinking, why aren't they struggling with what I'm struggling with? And I remember, it may have been Padina, saying in conversation that maybe that person had gone through that experience or through that challenge in a previous life. And although when you witness that they don't struggle with what you're struggling with, they may have already gone through it, and maybe going through a different challenge that you are not witness to. I found an awful lot of common sense and rationality to the whole concept of reincarnation, and it's quite firmly embedded now in my personal belief.
So tell me a little bit about karma.
That's obviously something that we've spoken about at the foundation, and as far as I do understand it, it is a law within certain belief systems that if you do ill to somebody, that the law of karma is that a similar ill will happen to you within the next life. And as has been explained to us by a spirit, that is not so, because that would mean that the great mind is a judgmental and vindictive deity who is punishing you for making a mistake. And within the lives that we lead, that are tapestried for us to live, we will make mistakes. That is part of the point of living a life on earth. So when we return home and we go through the life, which is what happens, we retire to a place, to a hall of healing, and we go through our life in depth with an older spirit. And that's where the understanding and even more in-depth learning of the life happens. And when we look at those things that are deemed to be negative and hurtful and harmful, and of course they are, and they happened, but we have to go through it with acceptance and understand why we did it and what the ramification was for other people. And all I can say is that as a spirit, I would conceive that would leave us with a great deal of humility, and that would be certainly part of the learning of that lesson.
Thank you, Pat. Mike, when we're at home in a land that's been described so many times by Spirit as being idyllic and free and open and clear, with great clarity, is how Erasmus described it recently. Now, why would a spirit wish to take a life on the earth when he's living such an idyllic life at home?
I guess, Paul, that if we try and think of that question as a humanoid as we are, that does seem quite a conundrum, doesn't it? Because exactly as you said, why would we want to take a life? But when we are at home, we have an open memory box, which is the memories of all lives that we have lived, and every aspect of that within each one of them lives. There's a much bigger picture. The reason, as Patrick and Corrine have both touched upon, is our evolution to grow spiritually. So when we are at home in spirit, we will have a much, much better understanding of the lives that we live on earth and the reasons for it. So whereas as a humanoid, we might look upon someone who perhaps has a very difficult life, perhaps someone who has an illness. I can, if I dare say, and I'm sure my wife, Debbie, wouldn't mind me saying, but she suffers from an autoimmune condition, which at times leaves her in a lot of pain. And when I've spoke to my wife about tapestries and about reincarnation and taking a life, she would sometimes question me and say, I can't believe that I would have taken a life to have been in such pain as I am at times. But again, and it's easy for me to say, I'm not the one that's suffering in pain, but I would say that in spirit, when we look to take a life, we do have full acceptance that is any hardship or any suffering that we may go through within that life, it is all just part of the learning experience. And we have a much, much better understanding of this, I'm sure, in spirit, of the reasons for all of this. If I'm honest, my focus on life is the life I'm currently living now. My beliefs in spirit, as I've said many times before, are very strong. And I do believe in reincarnation. I suppose comforting isn't the right word, really, but it's knowing that life is eternal, and I don't know how many lives I may have had before, and I don't know how many lives I may yet have to take on Earth. But if I look upon the life I'm living now, whilst I have no desire for it to end, I don't cherish the thought of dying. I have no great fear of that, for I know that life, not as me, not as Mike, won't go on, but my spirit, it will. I'm not fearful at all of when that time comes. Obviously, for all of us, many of us have either friends or family, and that is only normal, isn't it? Only natural to feel a bit of upset that some of that will be left behind. But that is just something I accept, that is how it will be.
Okay, thank you. And Corinne, now when we live a life and we've come to the end of our life and we go home, are we going to be blamed for doing things we did wrong? Are we going to be corrected? Are we going to be punished for anything we do here on Earth?
Really, Paul, I do not believe so. Because really, when being on Earth, the most we learn is probably when we are making mistakes. And these mistakes are necessary. The great mind has made us, and he has made life on Earth for us with flaws and weaknesses. Because in his wisdom, he knows that we have to experience this, to go through life with these weaknesses so that we may work on them, and this will help us to grow. Now, the great mind knows that as being human, and we have forgotten that at home we had seen this tapestry and we had chosen this tapestry. We have completely forgotten it. And once on Earth, it is sometimes difficult, and some tests are being difficult, and we may fail. But in a way, there is no failure because it is all part of the learning process. And the great mind would never punish us because he knows that the purpose and the aim is, in fact, the spiritual evolution. So this is something very much different to what religions are saying. But here again, the great mind is really wonderful and great and full of goodness for us. And we can have faith in this. And after we return home, there is no punishment at all.
If I could just say a couple of little things, if you don't mind. I was thinking as you were talking, and one thing I wanted to clarify was that we are never told to take a life. I think this is important just to say because it's ourselves who choose to take the life. And for me, that's important because, as Mike touched upon, his wife asking why would she take the life she's led, and I think we've often wondered from time to time ourselves. But when we sit quietly and with the background of teachings we've had from the foundation and think about it, it's all about the learning. And to think about how we were, to try to think about how we were as a spirit at home, deliberating on, is it time to take a life again? And what sort of life should I take? And we have been told that we are offered 3 lives, I think, several lives. And as a spirit, we look at it with the eyes of truth and clarity. We wouldn't take a life that was too easy, because it would be like going into a kindergarten, primary school, to learn the lessons there. And also, we wouldn't take a life where we would have to go into a postdoctorate PhD class that we know that we just couldn't manage. So we know we take a life that will test us, but we know that we can get through. So I just thought it was an important point to make, that it's us who choose to come down to take a life. And something else I just wanted to touch on was, we've all had little experiences because we've all known each other many years in the foundation. And this will be true for people outside of the foundation as well, that people are drawn to certain things. We've said about karma and how each life isn't intrinsically connected to a previous life. But what can happen sometimes, as happened to me, and I know it's happened to others, very quickly, I was in Barcelona and I heard some music being played by a local band, a local folk band, and they were playing Sardana, local music called Sardana. And there was one particular instrument within it that froze me solid. And my mouth dropped open, and I found it irresistible. I just couldn't get enough of it into my ears. And that feeling was so strong and so powerful. And even now I can sort of play it, but it never has that strong feeling as it did in that moment. That when I spoke to Padina sometime later, she confirmed that I had a life there and played that particular instrument. And it's just a little door opening within the mind, opening and closing again, maybe, just to allow us to touch on something within us, for us to ask ourselves, maybe there's something more to than the here and now. And I think we've all experienced little moments like that. That was really comforting to have that, and it's something that I always hold within me.
Absolutely. That must have been quite incredible. Let me finish off with a little anecdote of my own. Many years ago, I went to Egypt and Luxor, where these marvelous temples were. And I remember sitting in the temple late at night, the lights on, and just relaxed. And I had this incredible sensation of being there before. And being a fairly arrogant young man that we tend to be at that age, I thought I must have been at least the high priest, or maybe a pharaoh, or something much grander than maybe I was. And I remember getting this incredible feeling. I've never had it since, but the sensation I've been there before, absolutely strong. And I was told many years ago, again by Padina, that I did have a life in Egypt at that time, but I was a slave in the Valley of the Kings. And just across from where I was sitting, across the river, the Nile, was actually the Valley of the Kings. So which would I have learnt more from? The life of a pharaoh or a life of a slave? I'll leave that one with you. Thanks ever so much indeed, everyone. And we'll speak to you again soon. The Erasmus Foundation is a spiritual teaching and healing foundation based in Laxfield, Suffolk, in the United Kingdom. We have a webpage, www.erasmus-foundation.org. If you would like to be a guest on our podcast, or indeed have further questions for us, then please contact me on paul@erasmus-foundation.org, and we'll do our best to accommodate you. Thank you very much for listening.